Hi, everybody. Tom Esch here, coming to you from St. Paul, Minnesota. And today we're talking about hazard recognition. There's so many different ways to look at recognizing safety hazards on a job site, and so many different kinds of hazards that it's impossible to cover all of them in here in 10 minutes. So, between slips, trips, and falls, the biological stuff, COVID-19, ergonomic stuff, so many different things. We will be mostly talking about how to put them in categories and how to get really good at eliminating or reducing the threat of hazards. But first, a story about a good friend of mine. His name is Jim Lynn. He's about 77 years old. His brother, Mike, used to own the Minnesota Vikings, and Jim is one of the best communicators and one of the funniest guys I've ever met. He was drafted to go to Vietnam in 1966, and he went to Vietnam. And before he got there, he had some very good training in boot camp and an officer training school. And he was given 120 hours of target detection, basically situational awareness for what to do in a war zone, how to survive in a war zone, how to spot a Viet Cong soldier in the jungle, how to smell, hear, see, even sense any threat, any little subtle hint of a threat. 120 hours, amazing. And he studied each one and categorized each one and went to Vietnam and was not injured, obviously came back alive, and really helped him avoid injuries to have that kind of training, that kind of awareness. And it was very successful. Most of us are, when there's a threat or something that is present as a danger, we get triggered. Our brains can actually go into this fight or flight response. And then the frontal part of our brains, the rational, clear thinking part, kind of shuts down or goes dark. And then when that happens, we're not thinking clearly and we're not making great choices about safety. So Jim had this special training in Vietnam and came back alive, obviously. And he told me he thought when he went there, there'd be a 30% chance he'd be killed. That was his feeling about it. It was actually 1 in 46 soldiers were killed in Vietnam. 304,000 were injured. And do you know how many that is? It's about 1 in every 10 soldiers in Vietnam was injured. Do you have any idea how many workers in construction in the USA are injured every year? According to OSHA, it's 1 in 10. Same as Vietnam. Unbelievable. If you remember that war or knew an uncle or I had a dad or somebody in that war, every war is frightening. And 1 in 10 in Vietnam injured, 1 in 10 in construction every year in the USA, give or take a little bit. Injured, seriously injured. So your job site's a little bit like Vietnam in terms of injuries, different kinds of hazards, but a similar percent of injuries. So knowing and dealing with active hazards is essential to preventing injuries and staying alive. So today I'm going to make 2 main points with you. Number 1, putting hazards into categories that you can think about and consider as you're looking at a job site, and then talk about them. And then secondly, how to eliminate or minimize these hazards, these risks, these safety threats. So first, the categories of hazards. There are 4 big ones in terms of fatalities. You've probably heard of them. Falls, struck by electrical, and caught in or caught between. Those are the big 4 fatality threats. But there's obviously lots of other kinds of injuries and lots of other categories that we can put hazards into. So the 5 I'm going to suggest are, number 1, the more common safety hazards, like the ones I just mentioned: slips, trips, falls, struck by faulty or poorly used equipment. Those are common safety hazards. The second could be considered chemical, biological, dust hazards. COVID-19 silica, asbestos, stuff like that, chemical, biological, and dust hazards. The third, ergonomics. You know, how are you lifting? How's your body posture when you're holding a 30-pound saw for 30 minutes or 2 hours a day? Repetitive motion injuries, that's all ergonomics. The fourth hazard, physical hazards such as weather, noise, possibly radiation. And the fifth, I would call organizational hazards. That would be communication, stress of any kind that's interpersonal or organizational. Maybe it's bad communication or miscommunication. So those are really the five main categories. As you're thinking about your job, what are the hazards and which of those categories do they fall into? I'm going to suggest later you take one of those per day, 5 categories, 5 days a week. Pretty simple way to approach and do some creative thinking around hazards. And the second point today is, you know, how can you eliminate, substitute, or reduce these hazards, these risks? And how can you deal with those right away in the midst of your crazy busy day and take the time that it needs to eliminate or reduce that risk? And some of us think, oh, we're weak, or we're perceived as fearful. If we do this, we're not courageous, or we just don't think that our boss would support us taking the time to do this. I guarantee you, your boss, your safety director, your soup, your owner will back you on this. They want you safe. They want to avoid injuries. All right. You can be confident you will be backed on this. And I consider this being smart and careful and actually courageous to take the time to identify hazards and then mitigate them. And you'll be around for a long time, for your family, for your friends, and know that you are making an important contribution to your company, both with the work you're doing and the safety approach that you give it. So the 4 best ways I know of to control a hazard: number 1, eliminate it. Number 2, make a substitution, do something different. Number 3, engineer something, design something structural on the site. And number 4, get a procedure, a standard operating procedure designed around it. And I'll give you 4 examples of these in an arena that I'm very familiar with, and that's cutting pipe with a demo saw. Now, your company may or may not do this, but it could be applied to any situation, any tool, or any situation. These very 4 best ways to control or mitigate a hazard. Number 1, again, eliminate the need to cut it. If you have a pipe, let's say you have a ductile iron pipe, 10-inch ductile iron pipe, and you need to make a cut, all right? but the pipe isn't properly supported, or maybe you can't fully support it, or you're concerned it's not supported well enough, which is one of the main reasons there's injuries cutting pipe. So you could eliminate the need to cut the pipe. Why? How? By ordering pipe that is cut to the perfect size. That's eliminating that need. Now, you maybe can't do that day. So number 2, that day you could make a substitution. If you have to cut that pipe but it's not supported well enough, you're concerned about a kickback on a demo saw with a diamond blade or abrasive blade, you could use a different saw. You could use a diamond chainsaw, much less likely to have a kickback. You could use a belly saw or a guillotine saw, any number of saws if you had that tool with you. Make the substitution. Number 3, engineer it. This is the next best method. Make a physical change on that job site that lowers your risk, that eliminates the hazard, in effect. I know of a contractor near Omaha. They had a guy badly injured just a few years ago, cut in the neck and up into the jaw. Brutal injury, actually. Had to be airlifted to the local hospital. They decided, he was cut while cutting a pipe with a demo saw that was on the ground, thinking it's on flat ground, it's not going to pinch. It pinched, as is fairly common cutting pipe on the ground. It still shifts or moves. Sometimes it drops. The ground is never flat, in my estimation. Anyway, they designed a jig, a structure and made a trailer for it on which they put the pipe. So whether it, if the pipe is on the ground, they simply put that pipe onto that jig that they made that prevents that pipe from pinching on the blade. It's a great solution. It's an engineered solution. It's simple, it didn't cost a lot, and it will prevent injuries. Great engineered solution. And number 4, standard operating procedures. Okay, these are commonly known and not always used, but they got to be agreed upon, known by the people doing the work. So when you have a ductile pipe that is underground and it needs to be cut, the SOP would be you have to support it every time, either by blocks underneath it or a slinger lanyard from above it, pulling up so that the pipe doesn't pinch, doesn't sag and pinch. Pretty simple, basic standard operating procedure, not always done. So eliminate the need to cut it, number 1. Make a substitution, use a different saw, number 2. Number 3, engineer it, design something that's safer. And number 4, have standard operating procedures related to the various most serious hazards that prevent injuries. Pretty simple stuff, not always easy to do every day when you're busy and you're slammed, but the best, safest companies do this stuff and practice it, and you can too. So as we are continuing here, to wrap it up, the 5 most common categories would be the basic safety hazards, the slips, trips, and falls struck by, and that's maybe the main area you're looking at, but also chemical, biological dust hazards, ergonomic hazards, lifting, repetitive motions, the ergonomics, physical hazards such as weather, noise, radiation, and organizational hazards, communication, stress, interpersonal conflict. And then the 4 best ways to eliminate or control these hazards, just simply eliminate them, get them off the job site. Make a substitution either with a different tool or a different solution. Engineer a solution, a way to mitigate, designing a safer way, and making sure you have standard operating procedures, SOPs, that are agreed upon and known and used. So now it's practice time. If you want to get better at golf, you got to play golf. You want to get better at shooting clay pigeons, you got to go shoot clay pigeons. You want to get better at communication and hazard awareness and safety, you got to practice. And a lot of safety is good communication. So for this practice time, there's 2 things I'd like to offer you as things you can discuss right now. Number 1, remember a time when you were not aware of a hazard, either at work or at home, and you were injured or nearly injured. Identify what was the hazard and what happened. So that's number 1. Number 2, what are the 3 top hazards as you see it for your crew today? Now you might have different ideas, but what do you consider the 3 most serious safety hazards today on your job site today? Is it traffic? Is it communication? Falling in a manhole? Is it a confined space thing, a trenching issue? Maybe people just not paying attention, not thinking, being distracted. What are the top 3 hazards? Identify them, talk about it. Thanks again for your time. What you do with this information you got today could prevent an injury for you or save a life for someone else. So do the right thing every time. You are worth it. You are the future of construction. And until next time, I'm Tom Esch, safety communication expert at your service. Thanks so much.